Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Games 312, where we give our game industry insider takes on the top game industry news stories each week. So here's what we got going on in this episode. A lot of games talk. So there's just an onslaught of game it was really interesting. The entire year, no one's released anything, and everyone decided the first 2 weeks at the end of November and December is when we want to launch games. So we're going to give updates on all of the core games that are launching. So Path of Exile 2, Marvel Rivals, Delta Force, Fortnite's new tax shooter Ballistic. They just announced that. And then really go into free-to-play mobile games. Infinity Nikki is apparently out and crushing it with 10 million downloads. Royal Kingdom, what's going on with Pokemon. So lots to cover on the game side of things today. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Donahoe. I'm the marketing and publishing role on the squad RPG that we call Twig.
Phil Black, comrade in the free-to-play revolution, raising my banner today.
And Eric Kress, I am head of strategy and investing in this hodgepodge of morons that we are doing this podcast with.
And Adam Telfer, product guy. Let's just go with that. Ending off with some real energy here. This is good.
You can be a comrade too.
No, definitely not.
Open ranks.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for playing along, everybody. So I wanted to kick it off and just say thanks to a buddy of mine who works at Amazon Games because he invited me to a screening of Secret Level. So this is a show on Amazon Prime that's a CGI animated kind of mini episode group of mini episodes. And it's based on famous game IP. So each episode is a different IP. So they showed us 8 episodes. It was Dungeons and Dragons, Sifu, New World. Arnold Schwarzenegger was voicing the main character, Unreal Tournament, Warhammer 40K, Pac-Man, Crossfire, and Armored Core had Keanu Reeves as the main mech pilot guy. So it released on December 10th, those 8 episodes, and the next batch is on December 17th. I highly recommend it. Amazing CGI, kind of rivaling Arcane levels of CGI in a way. Very, very fan-oriented. If you're a fan of these IPs, I think you're going to love it. I think that the Pac-Man episode was deeply disturbing, like not at all what you expect. It was really fucked up, actually. And I imagine it's going to be polarizing, so you should watch it just because it's weird. But Warhammer 40K, I think, stole every award. It was really amazing. And I went and looked and just see if anyone was talking about it. And on IGN, there are like 3,000 people who voted on the episodes already who have been watching it. And almost half said that Warhammer was the best one. So anyone else heard of this? Like, I actually didn't know about it.
This one also has the Concord episode, right? It has the Concord episode.
Did that get released?
Well, yeah, because they must have signed it before. I think there's like a whole episode of just Sony too, or just PlayStation stuff.
I haven't looked at the next 8. I know Mega Man is coming in the next 8, but I don't know about Concord.
Yeah, Concord is definitely one of the IPs that they picked. Yep. If it was successful, we would have had a transmedia story at this point. But instead, I'm just waiting for Phil's analysis to see all of the transmedia spikes that happened because of each one of these episodes.
I mean, this is an amazing marketing. If you're a movie exec, like this is just backdoor pilots. You just subsidize this stuff, right? That's all this is like which one gets some uppick. All right, let's turn into a full series. Okay. It's just a pilot.
Go ahead.
These are really, really high res, like really high quality, 9-minute, 10-minute type pilots, though. I mean, it's not cheap, I wouldn't think. But I was just kind of wandering around like the different services, and I came upon this, and I was like, the first one is like a total D&D, like super nerd. Like, I mean, I was hooked. My wife looked at me like I was some kind of fucking alien watching this thing, but like, it was awesome. So I've been watching them this morning as well. I haven't got to the Warhammer one yet, but all of them were pretty good. Actually, the Schwarzenegger one is probably the worst.
I think that's what kind of people voted on. I was like, and I feel sad because my buddy...
That dude can't act to save his goddamn life. You know what I mean?
Slow down. I can't have any of this Arnold bashing. What are you talking about? True Lies?
No. So
Eraser
Arnold
Man?
voice...
Jingle All the Way? Twins?
Are you defending
Predator?
his acting?
Like, how can you say this, Eric?
I'm not saying he's not successful. He brings in the money, dude, but the guy cannot act to save his life. And then when you do
pivoted to
voiceover, you
comedy.
got to learn how to act, right?
He pivoted from comedy to comedy from his action movies. Did you not see Twins? That was a brilliant movie.
Dude, are you being serious right now?
I read all 800
I just don't
pages of Arnold
understand how
Schwarzenegger's
either of you guys
biography.
have time to watch a TV show at this point. Because the amount of games that are launching right now, there's no time for TV. There's no time for TV. Right?
Bringing it back.
Yeah, that was my segue to get you off of Arnold.
All right,
take
okay.
it. Let's move forward. Yeah, that's good.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is a great man, though. I will give you that. But
Interesting documentary, too, on Netflix.
Kick-ass live ops need kick-ass tools. That's where Heroic Labs comes in. They just released a massive update to their Satori live ops platform. And having done my research, I can say with confidence that it's second to none. In a single product, you get everything you need, including event capture, player segmentation, feature flags, remote configuration, A/B testing, experimentation, live events calendar, messaging, retention graphing, analytics, and so much more. If you're serious about running live services in a game, get serious about the tools you use. Connect with Heroic Labs and make some serious cheese with your live ops.
Okay, let's get to shilling. Phil?
Yes, Miska would like you to know that the famous Game Exec Supper Club is hitting the road once again, and it's going to be on Sunday, the 19th of January at 6 p.m. at the Shoreditch Soho House. And I can tell you, Shoreditch is a really cool part of London. I'm sure the Soho House sounds even cooler. It's the night before PGC London. It's invite only, of course. It's limited to 40 people. It's who you'd expect at these events now. It's founders, it's execs, it's product and marketing leaders. There's sign-up links in the weekly newsletter and the DOF Slack. Miska also has 2 podcasts out recently. One is with Ken Nordstrom, the Swede who lives in Spain, about his book Up, Down, Up, which came out earlier this year and now has an audio recording, an audio version, I believe, as well. And they recorded a podcast together when they were at Slush in Helsinki. Those are always the best podcasts with Miska, in my opinion, is when he's in a room talking to someone. There also is the audiobook also has clips from you, Eric.
That's damn
and
right,
Laura?
dude.
And Laura.
I'm
Are
a
these
star.
endorsements?
I'm a star. Yes.
There's also a podcast that Miska just did on attribution with TikTok and AppsFlyer, which I've got in my queue. I'm very excited to listen to that one. And on the blog, Tiffany Keller wrote an awesome piece on hybrid monetization and how it may be a welcome refuge after gaming's fling with direct-to-consumer web stores. So let's see how that goes.
I don't know about that. Fling with direct.
I wouldn't call it a fling. Yeah.
I would not either. I think that's the future. Anyway, corrections. Adam has a couple.
Yeah, so just 2 quick ones. I mentioned last week that Path of Exile is cosmetic only. So that was wrong. Path of Exile does sell inventory slots, which is critical in the end game. So I appreciate the call out there. Path of Exile 2 so far looks to be repeating this playbook. But still, I'm going to call it that it's a pretty similar insight. Path of Exile, I believe, has lower ARPMAU than Warframe, Destiny, and Warcraft. So I believe it's clever. It allows them to avoid pay-to-win claims, but it's just not a deep spend system. Also talked about handheld systems, mentioned PlayStation Portal with 500K units sold. That was a Circana or NPD US only number. Unfortunately, I don't have the number for global sell-in or sell-through on that one. Those are my 2 corrections.
Thank you. All right. So I just want to do one quick kind of industry story before we do a few investment M&A things. So in the world of game journalism, they're just getting their ass kicked right now. So there are more changes coming. According to an outlet called Aftermath, they did a little behind the scenes interviewing with some folks from GameIndustry.biz and IGN. So in late October, Ziff Davis, who owns those 2 outlets and also owns Humble Bumble, put out a kind of a notice to the staff, an offer, and saying, hey, our organic revenue is down. It's down 10% since 2021, and we need to do some cuts. Does anyone want to, volunteer to leave? And it sounds like a lot of people actually did do that, if not already were being laid off. So it's very sad to hear that a lot of the folks that I think the guys that do the GameIndustry.biz podcast were 2 of those folks who just said that they were leaving. It sounds like they're left with like 1 full-time employee there. Like, I love GameIndustry.biz. Like, I use it a lot and research for this. I hope they can stick around. So anyway, sad state of video game journalism. Our heart goes out to those folks. Hope they can land in a really good spot. They have I think 15 plus years of experience. it's sad to hear this. All right, let's go to investments in M&A. Kress, you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll just do quickly some kind of bad news on some of the job reduction front. Outrider Studio, People Can Fly, just cut 120 jobs. This falls like 30 jobs in January. They basically just said that there was some canceling some projects, but they're still currently working on, I think, an unannounced Microsoft project. This feels like the studio is ready to get acquired at this point, but that's just speculation on my part. Also, Life is Strange, Duke Studio Deck 9 confirms another round of layoffs not disclosed. They laid off 20% of their workforce in February. Generally speaking, though, from talking to many people out there, it seems like bigger publishers are pulling back and canceling third-party and second-party bets and focusing more on bigger internal projects. This is my sense on what's happening out there, like at a macro level. Obviously, we see some evidence at the high level, like with Take-Two getting rid of their private division. I think this impacts like independent AA and single A studios, not to mention the fact that there's really no other funding sources out there available at the moment. So that makes it even tougher to run A and single A, AA. And so my general thoughts here, if you're in the industry or if you're looking for jobs in the industry, it's safest to find jobs at the big companies, big publishers and developers. AA, single A, it's going to be really a tough market this time, I think, for the next at least 5 years until we see an emergence of a new platform where independents can play and potentially make some money. So anyway, just kind of a sour end of 2024. So we'll see what happens in 2025.
Yeah. On that note, it was kind of interesting in our Slack channel, Tina Henderson posted that she's part of like a co-dev team. And because November and December are kind of slow for business, they ended up making a UEFN game, like a holiday-themed UEFN game called Sprinkles Sleigh Ride. I was like, Sprinkles Sleigh Ride. So I don't know. It's interesting that, maybe the UGC places are someplace that folks can go when they're kind of looking for the next thing to do.
Wow.
You're bored.
Just hang out in UTC land if you're
Yeah,
bored.
let's just
is there a business there?
Let's get Ethan Levy on the podcast and see what he has to say about that, Miss Jen.
I'm just saying, like, you need something to do. That might be something to give it a shot.
I swear to God, Ethan is like banging his head against the wall right now after you said that. Like I'm telling you, dude. Anyway.
Oh. Well, let's talk about games that are really crushing it right now. So, like I said before, lots of new releases. Everyone was launching like last week, this week. So we're going to spend the rest of the time kind of going through all of that big news. Sorry, Indiana Jones. Probably not going to talk about you, even though you got a really good 87 Metacritic on Xbox only, and PlayStation's not coming to the spring, by the way. But I do see lots of chatter about there's like secret endings and stuff like that in Indiana Jones. You guys interested in playing that? Like, no one's talking about that in our circles.
I'm playing it right now.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I played the first couple hours, actually.
You did?
It's actually a beautiful game. Like,
it looks
and it's really
beautiful.
Nostalgic, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, the opening sequence playing through. Yeah, it's good.
But just the whole vibe of it is kind of, you're like living those movies. Well, again, I haven't played that long, but it's a beautiful game. But I don't think this is going to move the needle for Xbox. I'll tell you that much, though. Like, this is not like some mass market, like, bombshell, but it's a high quality game.
I did also see it had an 87 Metacritic and an 8.7 user score. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It was kind of the same. So anyway, Phil, why don't you take it away and do a little summary for us, especially for Steam, because they're crushing it too, right?
Lord, oh Lord. It is probably the greatest 2-week stretch in free-to-play history. So we have Stry Nova, which we've been following, which is that weird anime kind of paper girl game, which came out. We got Supervive, which we've been covering. Royal Kingdom, we've been covering. Infinity Nikki, Marvel Rivals, Delta Force, Girlsfront Line 2, which unfortunately didn't make the cut for today. We'll be back next week with Girlsfront Line 2, and Path of Exile. A little bit of a cheat on the free-to-play side, but kind of halvesies. I think there are winners here. I think there are immediately some winners that pop out when you look at this group. One of them is Steam. Steam has been on the rise for a really long time. Eric, you keep pointing out that almost all of the increase in users have come from China. And we see that reflected in this last weekend where we had this amazing confluence of events. They reached a new all-time high, 39.2 million players logged in at the same time. incredible for Steam. So I think they get another crown for continuing to grow and the Chinese government continuing to let them seemingly go unregulated. I think the other winner we have to give out is to Dual SKU, which continues to see a little bit more uplift in China. So we had Infinity Nikki, which is available on both mobile and console, including PC. And we also had Delta Force, which isn't quite there on the mobile side, but we know is gearing up towards that. Strinova is another example of a game that is dual SKU, and I'm actually surprised we haven't seen dual SKU from Supervive, especially when we go over that shocking riot number, which I just can't get out of my head. It's completely like altered my worldview, Jen. That only 5 to 10% of legal revenue comes
was
from North America.
To be fair, a rioter did say that was incorrect.
Interesting. So I would say dual SKU seems to be on the rise. I think we'll see Girlsfront Line 2. I'll be interested to see whether or not they do a desktop app. I'm seeing more mobile games also do direct distribution. So Netmarble had a King Arthur game that actually came out a couple weeks ago, which also they just kind of dumped the PC SKU out for. So I think you got dual SKU, which seems to be a winner, but less so than Steam. Free to play obviously just absolutely dominates this category. So welcome to the revolution. We continue to march step by step. I think the real winner in all of this is China, by far and away. Strinova, Supervive, even via NetEase, and eventually, hopefully, the Chinese release will give them some sort of uptick. Infinity Nikki, Marvel Rivals, Delta Force, Girlsfront Line 2, Path of Exile may be by the Kiwis, but it's owned by Tencent. I mean, wow. If you're sitting in China right now, your GDP numbers may be down, but at least like your gaming economy numbers seem to be up. What a huge win for them. And not just in China, but also these games have cross-region appeal in the West too. So again, it's cross-regional now. It's truly a global market. I think normally we've had the market segmented between not just the East and the West. I think Japan has kind of done their own thing, but we're starting to see more games go across more different regions and across more different platforms. The battlefield is opening.
Well, okay. Easy there, Tiger. Right? Like, these are Chinese developers making games for China, right? Like these are not like Western developers having success in China. Like, there's a big difference, And we don't know if the revenue is actually going to follow on. Like, user base is one thing, but this is all vanity metrics at this point. Like, if they don't make money, who gives a fuck, right?
Yeah, no, that's all fair. Okay. I still
Okay.
think these games at least had uptick in the beginning. I agree with you. Like, so what? You don't think these games, they're not Western developers that have appeal in China? I would be interested to see how Path of Exile does in China.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I think that's out of curiosity. But yeah, it's not primarily Western developers. I mean, yeah, it's Chinese developers. Somewhat in the case of Infinity Nikki, it's kind of Japan, China. But okay, I mean, that's still a W for China.
It is a W for China, yes.
Yeah. I also think the W goes to crossplay, PC console crossplay. And maybe in some cases, crossplay mobile to PC console. Just it looks like the ability to not necessarily that you're, playing a mobile person versus a PC console person, but it seems like many of these games are having that feature. We talked about this a lot before, but that seems to be really valuable, especially in China, where, as we know, mobile is the dominant way to play. If you can pick up and do some things at home on your PC or on your console, it seems to be valuable.
Delta Force is still not on mobile.
It is not. It is not
it's
yet.
not on mobile.
It's coming. They delayed it. I think they announced the delay kind of at the last minute, and it's slated for spring 2025.
So the only game on this list that's actually cross-platform with mobile is Nikki, right?
Strinova as well.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's keep an eye on that.
But yeah, let's take a look at the PC console performance, because I think that's been pretty exciting to watch. So checking in first on Supervive and Strinova. Early signs were that Supervive had better underlying retention, but now, unfortunately, both are clearly showing sort of the usual decay curve on CCU from launch. So unfortunately, even for Supervive, where there was early strong signals, we're going to start to see that speed up of decay, unfortunately, because without meaningful live content and with matchmaking starting to go down, we're just seeing a lot of these PvP games start to decay faster, unfortunately. And let's then shift to go to Marvel Rivals and Delta Force, which I think last time we were talking about bets here, and unfortunately we got it wrong. Delta Force peaked at about 120k CCU over the weekend. Marvel got 480.
Wasn't that my vote?
It was. Kress got it. Kress
got it. Okay, sorry. I assume
we got it
all
wrong.
bet
Don't
Yeah,
fucking
yeah.
keep
No.
me in that you're
I was
fucking
gonna say-
loser category.
I was
Okay.
gonna say.
So what? But what did you base it on, Eric? Was it just like it's Marvel, it's going to do it?
Fucking Marvel, dude, and it's
Okay.
NetEase.
So
dude.
it wasn't
Like,
any
those-
sort of sophisticated way. It was just shooting from the
but
hip.
it's also
Okay.
NetEase. Like they know what they're doing, you know. Like
Well, it was-
building online
Yeah,
games.
so
It's
does
Teaming.
fucking Marvel.
Tencent. So does Tencent. But anyways, 4X. So 4X in
Yeah.
Delta Force and roughly doubling Finals launch, which is a decent comp. It launched at the same time of year. So keep in mind, this is only Steam. So console performance for Marvel Rivals is a black box as of now. But Marvel did announce that they got 10 million players after about 72 hours, which matches Infinity Nikki, which Finals reached after about 2 weeks and roughly matches Apex Legends. So if you think of the curve that Apex Legends had for its install curve, so it announced 10 million after about 3 days. You got 25 million after 2 weeks, 50 million after a month, then 100 million after 2 years. That's that kind of decay curve. So that'll be the comp to see if they can actually reach those heights, or was this a big spike and are they going to start to decay faster like we saw with Finals? So we got this wrong in terms of which game would have the most CCU. We also didn't define the time scale. So keep in mind, this is just weekend one. We're getting excited here saying this is like
Yeah.
the greatest victory for free to play. This is the spike. We said the same thing when Finals launched. Do these things actually retain? That's the bigger question here, right? Retention dictates what's going to happen next. So what's interesting to me when we look at this 4X number is that typical pre-launch PC console metrics didn't predict this. VG Insights reported that Delta Force had 20% more wish lists going in. GDC Co. said that Delta Force had a higher hype score. Twitch had higher viewership for Delta's betas versus Marvel. And also generally, Marvel basically went dark after their beta in the summer versus Delta Force had that big beat recently during Steam Fest. So this is where what gave my basis to say like, hey, I think Delta Force has something here. And yeah, we're saying Marvel, but also generally military shooters tend to do better than other types of shooters, right? So if we go back and just ignore the performance, you say those were the signals. And actually, these metrics are imperfect and very loosely correlated. So I believe the world needs better intent to download go-to-market metrics so we can have better understanding of all of this.
Hey, by the way,
but
do you
look-
know what the most predictive metric on the planet is? Mr. Kress's brain. You know,
I was about to say,
You just
Adam's
gotta
trying to
listen
find a
this
model.
metric. That's
Yeah.
right. This
That's
is
the
like
model
the
right
best
there.
model
Never
out
going to
there.
base it on you. Yeah. Never
Oh,
will.
that's funny.
But
Okay.
I do think there's another lesson here, Adam, which is like HD, particularly Steam, like they're getting scale at launch. They're getting downloads.
Yep.
Like this has been mobile's problem is that they need to solve for distribution. And they've basically been doing that for the last 2 years, trying to figure out how we can build like the most elaborate fake ad possible. It feels like Steam, I don't want to say self-discovery, but they can put games into the hands of players. They can put games into people's libraries. Do you think that's a fair claim?
I don't think so. Because like you're looking at it in one point in time, right? Like with mobile, we have user acquisition to drive ongoing discovery post-launch, which then means there's actually less focus on day one performance. You can actually recover post-launch, right? In this case, everything is about this launch. This is the best moment in time they're going to get the most number of players. And then in terms of like the scale, right? Like Finals, 15 million, right? Like where did that grow to? Overwatch 2 getting to like 40 million, Apex Legends 75 million. Like these are amazing outcomes, but we're talking about the tippy top here. Then you're looking at like, would you say the same thing about Sternova and Supervive with 30K CCU, 40K CCU? Like they did not manage to get that type of scale. So I would say like actually PC console has a discovery problem, especially post-launch.
And if you're a smaller scale SKU, right, that doesn't have the budgets, right?
Yeah, as a marketer, I'm like freaked the fuck out when you just go through your list, Adam, of all of those really great, typically predictive indicators that you're going to do well, right? Wish lists and hype scores and, all of that. I'm just like, oh my God, like what indicators besides
Yeah.
Kress's brain do I use as a marketer and like a demand planner to be like, okay, like here's what to expect. And this is just Steam. I get it. And console probably, maybe still operates differently, but I'm a little bit freaked out. And then especially, if I'm another hero shooter, I might be freaked out. And so, I think I asked you hey, from a player insights perspective, Stan is hearing that Deadlock players are talking a lot about Deadlock. Now, this is before this week, right? So Deadlock is still very much on people's minds. Overwatch is still on people's minds. I talked last week about how, players love these tried and true games, and then they kind of like vacation in the new games for a month and then come back. And so it's going to be really important for us to revisit this entire conversation in January, February, and see what happens. But can you walk me through? I asked you to pull some data on Deadlock versus Overwatch versus Rivals. What did you find?
Yes. So I thought it would be really interesting to take a look at Deadlock, Marvel Rivals, and Overwatch 2. So the first thing you'll see, and if you're following the YouTube version, we have a nice little graph of Steam PSU, is that Deadlock has been in basically a linear decline since September. It is actually not looking good at all for Deadlock, which I'm shocked by. I'm shocked it's been this rapid of a decline this quickly, and it continues to decline. It hasn't stopped. It had started in September. It reached a peak PSU of around 180,000, and now we're looking at maybe 40,000, and it continues to decline.
But there's no content, right? Like, I mean, they're in like secret.
Oh, they're updating the game. No,
Okay.
it's you can go down. They're releasing content. They have new heroes. They yanked the ranked mode, which was really bizarre. They added like the thing that all hero shooters are doing is basically a test server for new heroes. They're pumping content in the game. It's certainly not dead. I've just been surprised that their grip on retention has slipped that much. You take a look at Overwatch 2. Overwatch 2 is actually in a really good place. And again, we're just looking at Steam numbers here, so we don't know what's happening on console. But they've been steady Eddie for a really long time. I know we have kind of somewhat of a negative Blizzard narrative on the podcast, but Overwatch 2 continues to deliver pretty steady results. And of course, we see this green line. If you can, zoom out of your eyes and see this green line way up top, around 450,000 peak PSU relative to both Deadlock and Overwatch 2, sitting at, maybe 40,000. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting to see is since the release of Marvel Rivals, are we seeing some declines in those other games? And that actually does appear to be the case. So since Marvel Rivals has come out, Overwatch 2 and Deadlock are down about 10% since the release of Marvel Rivals. Again, it's very early. We go back to the dating analogy. Everyone may just be on their first date. Maybe they'll come back to their steady Eddie. But it does look like there is a causal relationship between the release of Marvel Rivals and Overwatch 2 and Deadlock seeing some decline in PSU. And I'm very curious to see whether or not this trend will continue. And I can say, having played a lot of Marvel Rivals this weekend, perhaps an obsessive amount of Marvel Rivals, I'm ready to call it Overwatch 3 in many regards. This really is a hero shooter. It's the right category to put it in. It's tough to put Deadlock in this category because it takes a lot more of the traditional MOBA stakes. It has creeps. It has an in-game shop. Marvel Rivals doesn't have any of those things. It really is, a character hero shooter action arena game.
I think you're splitting hairs. Like, I think right now it's a little too early to call about how it's going to be impacting those other games. In general, games tend to, when they launch, especially on like a Thursday, they'll get that initial bump over the weekend. And then in terms of like Overwatch 2, Deadlock, I've got to see that in terms of what was their trend beforehand. And I got to see it on a larger scale, because you're seeing already, like in general, those games were either a little bit flat or declining. I think we're splitting hairs on just looking at these 5 days.
Not to mention, Overwatch 2
was
released. Overwatch 2 was released on Steam, I think, like 9 months after.
It's encouraging that for that smaller niche Steam audience that they're stable. I agree with Phil on that. But in general, that's like most, I would assume, of their audience is going to be on paddle.net. And then there's going to be a section that's on Steam and a section that's on console. Yada, yada, yada.
No, I think that's totally fair. I think we're seeing something. I would say move your priors a little bit. And if we continue to see this, move your priors a lot. But I think a little bit is appropriate for now. The other thing that was pretty interesting was to take a look at the Marvel Rivals country distribution, because this was a global release from what I understand. And China's only clocking at about 12% of the player base, according to Video Game Insights. And the United States is taking 25%. And Australia, number 3. Didn't know we had a lot of Marvel heads out there. That's unique to see.
Again, I would also, on this one, watch it stabilize, because especially on free-to-play stuff, the way that they're tracking this stuff, it's not perfect. So we should watch this trend over time. I wouldn't get caught too much on the Australian number. Yeah,
the characters are really
look,
cool.
I think they've nailed that initial funnel. So like, I'm going to guess, but like, product terms, the D1 to D7 is going to look pretty strong on this. What I'm more worried about, what I'm thinking more around is their enduring hooks. Because like, look, finals also had a really strong upfront funnel, like was super exciting to play right from the beginning, was really unique. But it's all about that enduring piece now. Like, can they actually retain from this top? Can they do better than what Apex did from their launch and really be able to sustain? And so from my sense, from my little bits of playing, I think they've got a strong roster. I actually like the call that they did with the amount of characters that came out right from the beginning, because there's a ton of characters that I can be trying out, mastering all at the same time, rather than paying or waiting a ton of time in order to get access to them. So I think that they're going to get that initial burst of engagement quite strong. But I think the trade-off there is there's just not a lot to chase after in this game besides sort of battle passes and quests. And also I'm thinking about like skill curve and skill ceiling. Like after D7, which it hasn't even happened for me yet, is there real things that I'm trying to be getting better and better and better at? Right now it feels a bit shallow to me. I feel like that's probably to do with the types of characters that I'm creating, because I'm tending to go to like Venom, like pretty simple characters to play as. So I've got to try out some of the higher skill characters, but like that's where I'm trying to figure out. The other thing here is I was chatting with Chris Sides, who did the PvP podcast. I think it's a lot to do with what's quote unquote Chris Sides' trademark love bombing right now, which is, are they going to be coming out with a fast cadence of high quality live content, which I believe is the plan? And how valuable is that content going to be coming out? Because I think they could actually get away with a lower skill ceiling, like less enduring high skill, and actually lean in more on live content. And then this thing could retain pretty well. That's my take.
I really want to agree with you. I played a lot this weekend. I would say the thing I'm most curious about is how this performs on console. That's really where I'd put my bet, because it's a third person rather than a first person game. And there's a lot of melee combat. I think particularly with aim assist, you can be pretty generous here. So I'm very curious to see if we can get some console numbers on this. Consoles have always been tricky for first-person shooters, but I think for a game like this, I think the gamepad is completely appropriate. So I'm very curious to see how this does. And I think there's just an audience fit for an IP like this on console, even more so than PC. So I wonder if it will be able to survive on PC. I'm shocked that there isn't more monetization in the game. There's almost nothing. There's some cosmetics you can buy, but they're choosing not to monetize heroes. The progression systems, to your point, basically don't exist. There's very little, to your point, to chase after. I was surprised they couldn't even throw me a Apex Legends style banner system with stat tracking, a bunch of different slots. There's almost nothing. And the thing that's made me check my priors on this, though, is if we go back and we think about when Overwatch launched, I mean, even to this day, to some degree, Overwatch never really had that much progression. I mean, there was basically account level progression, which added a star to your profile, and you'd occasionally get some loot boxes, which would give you, I guess, some crafting currency. But Overwatch has always been really bare bones on the system's design, too. I mean, it was really late where they even introduced the gold guns in competitive, but they didn't have a lot to chase after either.
To challenge that, though, like, we've watched all of these games flop in this space, right? And now we're thinking about what it takes to compete in 2024. Overwatch 1 in 2016, right? Like, I feel like the bar has to be higher than that. Yeah.
Right? Overwatch was a premium
game. They would have had the benefit of being a premium game from launch.
It's still retaining. I mean, it's still
retained.
Yeah. I mean,
are you talking about Overwatch 2 at launch? Or are you talking about Overwatch 1 at launch?
Overwatch 1.
Yeah. Like, Overwatch 2 did come out with additional progression vectors at their launch, which then allowed them to retain.
What else did they have? What else did they really have at Overwatch 2?
I thought they had a bunch of like event passes and stuff like that on top of things.
I mean, it's always been kind of.
And then they also had all the features coming over from Overwatch 1. But yeah,
I just thought there would be more Chinese style monetization and progression systems in Marvel Rivals, and they really backed away from all that. When we talk about Delta Force, they leaned into the Chinese element there, but this feels very westernized.
I'm very surprised that NetEase kind of pulled back on this game. I bet it was more of a licensor problem than it was NetEase willingness to, do predatory monetization.
But keep in mind, when I'm talking like long-term retention, you don't have to do it with progression systems like RPG progression or passes. It's also things like skill,
Yes. And I actually think that's where this game has problems is mastery. Are the characters interesting
exactly.
to master?
That's where I'm more concerned.
So I wanted
it
to.
feels like they have so much good shit. Like if I'm Rocket, I can climb onto Groot. Like they have all these cool team up abilities. They have seasonal bonus. They have all this cool shit. And yet like it doesn't feel like it matters that much in my actual moment to moment mastery of the character. It still feels like a very surface level. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, no, well, that's exactly what I wanted to touch on from a kind of like that marketing perspective of like, all right, what's your USPs? What's your point of differentiation? And when I really looked at this game and, had the opportunity to actually talk to a lot of players in different elements, they said two things. One is there's this thing with destructible environments that changes the maps. And number two were the team ups. And so you and another hero can kind of team up. And those two things were very different than the core play of Overwatch. Now, the other thing that is interesting, and I wanted to actually ask you, so you've got those two things, is are we in the honeymoon phase where there is no meta? There is no play the meta. So the challenge in Overwatch is it is very difficult for new people to come into Overwatch because if you don't know how to play the meta and what role you have to play and how you have to play that role, all of those people are like, fuck this, I'm out because I'm getting yelled at. But in Rivals, like no one knows what that is yet. And so it's still really welcoming. You still have a skill chance of competing because people haven't figured it out. Is that part of the like 1 month, 2 month evaluation? And that if people start like getting to there being a meta, does that start ejecting organ rejection because people are like, ooh, now I'm getting yelled at? Is that something that maybe happened in Rivals or other games? I don't know, kind of posing that to product guy and monetization guy.
I think we are in a honeymoon phase. I agree with you on that point. And that's why I want to watch things over the next couple of weeks to give a real assessment of like what that trajectory looks like. From just playing it enough. But like in general, all PvP games have an issue of like how much work does it get to understand the meta and get up to that point. But the thing that keeps going in the back of my mind is like you look at the most successful games in the space, that onboarding funnel of new players and making sure that they're having a great time within the thing is actually not the most important funnel. The most important funnel is that they have a critical mass of very high skill players, and those players have a very long mastery curve. Those new players being able to learn what the meta is, typically there's a shortcut, which is there's an S tier character or an S tier build that people can Google, and then they play that build and they feel competent enough in the game, and then now they're attached. And that happens with most games, even like card games, where there's always clever designers will make sure that there's always a few easy to reach for builds or characters that then allows those players to have that quicker speed up to the end game. That then as the meta shifts, now they've got to shift to another character that's higher skill. So I don't see that as a huge challenge, but I'll pass it to Phil.
No, I think you're right, Adam. I mean, everyone's going to solve for equilibrium at some point. And the thing is that all the characters are available for everyone. They've chosen not to monetize on characters. And that actually makes the meta or the equilibrium emerge faster because everyone has access to everything. I think Marvel Snap tried to actually go after this with their collection level system and their series system on how they distributed cards. I think they really wanted to make sure that not everyone had the same set of cards so that you would get a diverse meta as you started to progress. And that introduced a lot of other problems that they're still trying to get out of. Yeah, I largely agree with Adam on this one. I don't necessarily think it's a problem though if there's a meta. I mean, don't play competitive. Play casual.
Well, the Kress LLM is basically predicting that this thing is going to die very fast.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
He's throwing down the gauntlet.
The highest CCU on day one, and it will die fast. How fast? Yeah. Specifically, how fast, Chris?
1 or 2 months.
In 2 months, they'll be at like less than a quarter of their peak CCU.
All right.
Okay, that is a good bet.
Yeah,
okay.
I love it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, in the past, I've seen about a month.
Wait a minute. The LLM is calculating again. Yeah, that's right. 25% peak CCU.
ChatGPT 401. What's the one that like takes longer?
The preview?
He's wrong.
If Kress gets this, Kress will be an input in my forecast from now on. This is it. This is the bar.
I think the final thing is there's some really interesting Marvel cross-sell, and Phil pulled somebody pulled a couple of really interesting kind of releases that showed how Marvel and the other games were, in a sense, promoting the launch for this. So a little free marketing.
hold on, Jen, slow down, because you guys mentioned this last podcast, and I was screaming at the podcast. So
Why?
there's a Marvel Rival crossovers in Marvel Snap, Marvel Puzzle Quest, Future Fight, and even Fortnite. Hold on, what? Hold on, can Marvel dictate that they want crossovers for their IP in these other games? If I'm Ben Brode and I'm running Marvel Snap, I don't want to do free user acquisition for Marvel Rivals. If I run Marvel Puzzle Quest, if I'm Demerge or whoever owns that game now, I don't want to be doing UA for other people. How does you even do this as an IP holder? How does this even come together? What is this?
I imagine that the Marvel folks pull that together as a way to help them. Now, I agree. Like if I'm
Can they mandate
one of the other,
this? Get in line. It's IP time, boys.
I think it's very difficult for a licensee to tell a licensor to go F themselves. And so typically, I bet that there is some sort of reciprocation happening, if not now, at a later point.
Okay. The way I understand the world of Marvel in particular is that everyone has their own launch window that they are slotted into. So they don't want to like step on each other's toes during those windows. So maybe another option is for them to cross promote across everything, right? So they have this window, someone else is going to have the next window. And so maybe they're just allowing for these type of cross promotions in the meantime or during these big launches. I don't know. But yes, the answer to your question is certainly Marvel can help coordinate between the different publishers they're working with, promotions. Like I think that's part of the licensor's job, that team.
Yeah, it's called
Bingo.
range planning. Yeah. So, when you're at a licensor, you call that range planning, which is, okay, how do I make sure that my different licensees have a window of opportunity where they're not competing with other licensees in it, particularly when you can do that. So, Kress, I think you're right on that.
And you think about it from Marvel's perspective, right? They are fucking destroying the movie IPs right now, like left and fucking right and center, like the only thing they got going on is this shit, right? That's actually improving the brand. You know what I mean? So maybe there's more focus on this stuff now because they can't get a movie out that's good to save their lives. But
yeah. Unless it's Agatha All Along on Disney Plus, which was awesome. It doesn't count. I know that doesn't count.
It does not count. Yeah.
Although they have a bunch coming soon with the next phase, right? What's it? Secret Wars? I forgot what the next phase is that they're
you're
forgetting
gearing
Kraven
up
the Hunter.
for.
You're gonna have to buckle in this weekend for $15 million opening.
That thing looks like a disaster. Absolute disaster.
What's this weekend?
Spider-Man universe, like spin-off character who I've never heard of. And the
Not a
movie's
spinoff. Remember the Sinister Six, longtime villain.
Anyway, the fact of the matter is the movie is tracking to like the lowest opening in the history of fucking Marvel. So it's like,
below Madam Web and Morbius.
Jesus Christ. Dude,
I don't even know who you're talking about.
Hold on. I had tried to watch the Madam Web movie in earnest, dude. That thing was fucking terrible. Dude, there's not many movies I can't get through the first 30 minutes. It was horrible. Absolutely horrible. Anyway, so
again, I don't know how you guys have time to watch movies when there are so many games to launch.
Step into the future of game monetization with Exola, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Exola provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Exola, powering game developers to achieve global success.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
Segue into Path of Exile 2. Let's talk about Path of Exile 2. Because really, we buried the lead here. Path of Exile 2 had a monster weekend, even above Marvel Rivals, which I really, really appreciate. Yep. Peaking at 580 CCU, which is 30% higher than Marvel Rivals. And this is for a paid access game. You need to pay $30 US in order to join this early access. I love this. I talked about this before in terms of their strategy for launch. I think it's really, really smart. I love that it also beat a PvP service at launch with this strategy, as well that it seems to be countering a narrative that I think we all have shared, which is that PvP is more mass market than PvE. That looters are niche, or RPG games are niche. MMOs are only for the nerdiest of the nerd, right, Eric? No.
I'm not
quite what I've been
sure.
saying. But go ahead.
Okay.
Finish your thing.
Well, I'm not saying that you're saying it. I'm saying that in general, when we talk about the industry trends, people tend to say PvP services will get a lot more players than deep RPG PvE services, right? And also Path of Exile in general is just especially very niche of a niche. And so that countered all this, right? Like, number one, I love the strategy, paid access, nailing retention before going free to play. They're going to get a ton of content already in early access. I've been playing. There's so much stuff to do, so many builds. This is right now their golden cohort. And on top of that, they've really leaned into nailing core combat and theory crafting, which I think are two big elements in looter RPGs that have been missing, including in games like Diablo. And I'm playing right now, and I'm finding it way more engaging than Diablo 4, especially on the core combat side, which obviously is just the beginnings. But I love where Diablo's gone pretty simple. Like, I melt the entire screen of enemies and never have to think about any damage. I'm just kind of wading through a damage lake. Versus this, no, I actually have to think. I actually have to roll around. I need to avoid attacks. It's closer, in my mind, to like Hades, or closer to more like a Souls-like. Because you actually have to think in the second, which just makes the game more engaging from my perspective.
Can
Phil?
I ask before Phil goes, an ignorant question? So you pay $30 US in early access. When it launches, it goes free to play? How does that work?
But it's it's in 9 to 12 months. Like, this is not like a
so actually many free to play games have done this, where they say there's a starter pack, or there's a founder's edition, which is the only way to access this game for a limited time window is to pay and get access to the founder pack. Typically, the founder pack also has a bunch of extra goodies for you joining in early. Mm-hmm. But then that allows them to slow down the funnel to get that golden cohort of players, but also to figure out the retention. And then they go free to play in the future. So even Multiverses did this at their first launch. And who's the other one? Rogue Company did this. A whole bunch of games have done these founder editions. Phil?
Jen, this is the exact conversation I've had with brand marketers when I've tried to push this exact strategy onto basically every game I've worked on that is going that will eventually end up as free to play. I've tried to pitch them as starting as paid early access. And Adam, I think there's a really important point for Gen 2 is like, how do you market this, right? You know, is it a founders pack? I think that has a very different veneer to it than like it's paid early access. It's basically just a paid SKU. A founders pack carries different connotations with it. You can carry the paid founders pack over to the full release and just make it you just don't get access anymore. You just get all the goods that are associated with it. You should be doing mega premium ultra founders packs for $100. That's an easy win. I don't think that was the case with Path of Exile. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. Did they just have the $30 SKU?
They did. I just bought it, so I was just looking at it. They did have premium ones. So.
Beautiful.
Love
it to pieces.
I was so happy.
Sorry.
Chef's kiss.
I thought this was.
But this game is totally for you, Eric. This game is for you.
Okay.
You will love this.
Let me just quickly give Phil a shout out here, because I initially thought that this was just a free to, like a founders pack type thing. And in a few days, like you could, in a week or so, I would have to pay. I could play for free. And so I held off on doing this. And then I got totally sucked in because, it's $30. And I found out it's like 12 months before the fucking free to play thing. I'm like, fuck this. Exactly. I'm going to buy this stuff. And a minute I'm thinking, oh my God, Philip Black is a fucking genius, right? He's been talking about this for years, right? This is the strategy that he's put out there. And so a lot of games that are trying to do other things with these like free to play stuff, it's just like have a $30 access point and then sell it at higher premiums for like getting more access and more cool shit, dude. And so that you can get as much money out of the early people as possible, and then bring in the freeloaders later. Don't all go it at once, right?
I
By
love
the classic.
that.
At the time the freeloaders come on board 12 months later, dude, the game is going to be fucking rock solid, you know? And the people that are willing to spend are going to be more forgiving in a lot of ways as well, initially. So,
Yeah, I think the other thing this solves for is something, Adam, you've been mentioning, which is like how do you kind of like gate access? Because like once you're out the door, you're out the door. And surprisingly, like you can do region lock on Steam, but no one chooses to do it. It still is a big mystery. I've like tried to sign up the devs to this, and everyone's just like, "What is this?" And this is another way you can kind of gate access before releasing it to the masses, without having a clubhouse type situation. The brand marketers, though, always are confuddled by this, right? And I sympathize with you, Jen. It's like, if you're a brand marketer, like, what is this? Is this launch? It kind of sucks the air out of the room. Is the real launch when it's out of early access? Because you can't do your magical moments, right? Your confluence of events where you dump the budget. So what do you do with your marketing budget if this is the strategy? It kills all the magic.
No, it's hard, right? But number one is I love this. I think this is great. I do think it makes you have to think about your go-to-market very differently. And we talk about this in mobile free-to-play, which is, we talk about Monopoly all the time, how they kind of soft launched and rolled out different countries, and they didn't do the shark fin pop and drop that happens in AAA, even console marketing, but they did that like, let's, slow and steady wins the race, like the tortoise and the hare. So I think that there's an element of that here where you have to identify your bullseye audience. Okay, who are the absolute nerds that absolutely want this game? And you develop a marketing plan very specifically for them around the exclusive content and the benefit of you getting in right now. And you make it about that. And then once you open free to play later on, then your messaging and your positioning changes to go a little bit broader, and likely a little bit more by then, but you do have to, in a sense, bifurcate your spend. You have to bifurcate your audience and your messaging and treat it very differently. I would have to think a lot more about it, but that's my on the spot take. And plus, Adam, you talked the other day about like retention and how do we understand retention a little bit longer in a way that makes sense. Now, this is the golden cohort. They're going to be very magical in their retention, but it does give you some of those early indicators that you might need later on to understand, like, do we have something or not? I don't know.
Exactly. And what I love too is that you get that second beat, which after your retention, you can be flexible with this Path of Exile system as well. Like you get a big flood of revenue right now to pay back a lot of that project then fuel what should the marketing budget be for that second launch. And what I also like is if developers look at that second beat of free to play, and then they start to add their features at that time, right? Like now it's not just a beat, it's also a re-engagement beat for a golden cohort. Because like Marvel Rivals, creating that one moment where all friends come back and say, everybody's got to go play this thing, and trying to do that twice. If you can create moments for both segments of your players, new players that are coming in just as free, as well as your golden cohort, your core, you can create that moment. But I do think this is more challenging for PvP. We are looking at it for the context of Path of Exile. I think it's a lot easier to swallow because if matchmaking goes down here, because say they didn't get 580K CCU, they could still survive, right? That's still a viable model. But if, let's say, Supervive went out with a $30 Founders Pack SKU, right? And now the CCU was not 30K, it was 5K, right? That's a lot different situation. They've now killed the game, they've killed the launch, and they've only made whatever many units on a pretty pitiful Founders SKU, right?
Yeah, agree. PvP kind of changes how you think about it because you need the numbers.
Let's keep going because we got more.
Delta
Force, it's out, baby. We're cooking. Couple things I want to note about China. Always on my mind these days. Reporting from Daniel Ahmed of Nico Partners, who I think had some very interesting insights over Twitter. We were discussing them. On the Chinese side for Delta Force, you won't see them in the Steam numbers because they are distributing with a direct download of the client, and Tencent, of course, has their own portal. Right now, there's 40 million pre-registered players in China across PC and mobile. although of course the PC SKU is already out. So I think this is an old number, but still a real one. They had 40 million registered users. So there's still a lot of demand in China for this game. So when we review it right now, we're mostly going to be looking at Western numbers and the Western experience. And the first thing you'll notice when you play this game is this is hardcore Chinese copying. This brings me back. This brings me back to early free to play. So if you're watching the YouTube version right now, we're looking at a screenshot of Battlefield 2042 and a screenshot of Delta Force. And of course, this UI is pretty standard across most games, but we're talking down to the color scheme. Things are similar. And when you actually go and you play this game, they literally 1-to-1 copied Battlefield. It was shocking. Being in DICE coworker DMs it's interesting group messaging going on right now, but this is like straight up copying. And I don't say that with any venom. That's just the strategy they chose to go with. I'm sure it helped them release the game rather rapidly. We take a look at PSU for the game. We can compare kind of the total Battlefield numbers. And again, we're just looking at Steam here. So we're combining Battlefield 5, Battlefield 2042, and Battlefield 1, which all, by the way, have substantial populations that continue to this day. That's actually one of the interesting problems for both Call of Duty and for Battlefield is like, hey, there are all these players still playing all these old versions. What do we do with them? So if we merge those together, we're looking at, maybe around 30,000 CU. And when we look at Delta Force, it clocked in around 100,000 this weekend. And we do see a little bit of a decline in, I wouldn't even say a little bit, but a pretty big decline in Battlefield players relative to Delta Force. To Adam's point earlier in the podcast, though, it's still pretty early. This is maybe just the dating phase, but I do think there's a direct relationship between Delta Force and Battlefield. And when you play Delta Force, it's clear they're going for the Battlefield jugular. There's almost nothing new in this game. There's literally nothing new in this game. It is a 1-to-1 copy of Battlefield, only worse in the sense that they don't have any of the destructibility. They don't have Frostbite. I don't want to say that with Venom because what they do have is they have way more content. That is clear to me. And they really have to bet on content winning the day. And as we heard when we were on the podcast with the Timmy GM, is that they're also betting on anti-cheat winning the day. But I was pretty blown away at how 1-to-1 of a copy this game is from Battlefield. I mean, this is the thesis. Like, let's go after Battlefield. It has all of Battlefield's problems. Every single problem Battlefield has, this game has in it. Conquest is an absolute shit show. There's a ton of inequality in kills when it comes to Conquest. That was something that we're always dealing with at DICE, is that there's a very small portion of players who get so many of the kills. You can't really do skill-based matchmaking because the servers are so large and PSU constraints. There's so many Battlefield problems we could go into, Battlefield philosophy, but it has all those problems. And so for this thing to win, it really has to win on the live service and anti-cheat because they ain't going to win on anything else.
Is it winning on anti-cheat? Just because there is obviously that huge review bomb. And I was thinking even on Steam, at least for Western audiences, did that review score coming in pretty low because of the anti-cheat actually drop their CCU?
Potentially. I mean, okay, well then you'd have cheaters bitching. I mean, go to Battlefield's review. It's people always bitching about cheaters. It was their number one NPS result every single year. Cheaters.
Like the level of anti-cheat that they had within their game.
Mm.
Yep, it's similar to Riot. What they had in Valorant. It's aggressive. It's kernel level. Buyer beware.
I'm just asking the question of at least for Western audiences, did that actually hurt them at launch, or do we now think that that's going to help them retain?
In the long run, I think it will help them retain when Steam users get over themselves, as they always do.
All right, next.
All right, so pretty quickly here, and kind of a big deal. I didn't really know this was coming. So Fortnite goes first person with Ballistic. So Fortnite is announced a first-person tactical 5v5 shooter that is coming in early access on December 11th. So by the time you hear this, it will be available. So basically, it sounds like Valorant or CS inside of Fortnite. Likely a really strong overlap with BR, player behavior with tac shooter. I don't know. Sounds like a great idea. Product guy, what do you think?
So I like this play. Right? In general, what I'm finding with shooter audiences is things are not clean. So people assume that there's these specific silos of tac shooter players, COD shooter players, Battle Royale players, Battlefield players, Fortnite players. They all live in these little silos. But then when you look at the real data about the amount of overlap that exists between these things, it's a lot messier than I think a lot of people assume. In general, also, tac shooters tend to be younger and higher Twitch players. I like this play by Epic to avoid these players sort of aging out of their platform and going to another destination. Stop players bleeding to Valorant and to Counter-Strike. keep them within the ecosystem the best that they can, and keeping their lockers filled with Fortnite cosmetics, keeping them retained.
Awesome.
And it's funny too, because at least like this was their strategy when Fortnite started. They wanted to capture aging out Minecraft players. So now that they are the Minecraft, they're just trying to seek and prevent churn. Would I have picked a different shooter? Like, I think if they probably have higher overlap with like Call of Duty than they do with tax shooters. But actually, I haven't seen the data, so I don't. Maybe they saw it in their own data. But I do expect that Epic would actually have a few more games like this in the hopper, so they can start to respond if they see any subgenres explode, which to me actually points more towards how difficult the shooter space is. And we talk about black holes of engagement, right? Like, if they're able to basically build any mode that a competitor has very, very quickly within their ecosystem, they're able to build a pretty thick moat to keep those players in.
Go ahead.
Do you think they're using Valorant data to make this conclusion? Because Valorant's on EGS.
Maybe.
But like the thing is too, like I don't know how many players actually use the EGS launchers for Valorant. Like, sorry, the EGS launcher. Like the EGS launcher is like nothing. There's
Valorant's on EGS? Why would they do that? Okay, all right.
It's only, I guess it's only Fortnite players that are like, no, I'd rather not download the Riot launcher and use this for my Valorant launcher.
All right, let's get into some mobile. Infinity Nikki, like the game you never
Mobile-ish.
thought would be ish. That's true. It's cross-platform, but this is one of those really, really interesting. Some people call this cozy, and I'm like, that this is not a cozy game, everyone. But go for it, Phil.
First thing I think we should note is this is not on Steam when it comes to PC. This is actually on EGS. Speaking of the platform no one uses, I wonder how much they paid out for EGS.
I think that was a strategic bad move. I think they should have been on Steam.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus.
I would agree with you on that.
Only reason to go to EGS is because you want to have a Steam launch later. That's it.
Or
that's
the
the only
well, they could have gotten paid, right?
All right, cool. Infinity Nikki is out, and if you aren't familiar with the Nikki franchise, this is an absolutely insane, crazy, cocaine Asian pivot for a game that was mostly 2D free to play, still made a ton of money on mobile. It was a dress-up game. It's kind of almost like an Asian interpretation of Design Home, where you would have this main character, you're collecting outfits, and ultimately you're going into competitions where you're getting score, and some of the score is derived from your peers voting on which outfit is the best relative to two of them. And then you'll also get score, though, for hitting certain objectives, like satisfying a style requirement, which is kind of how they drive the meta. And so they've decided to throw that all to the wind and instead make a really high-quality UE5 game. And they ended up hiring the lead designer from Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is Kentaro Tominaga. We'll see if we get that one right. I am only 2 hours into this game. I played a lot of the original Love Nikki, which I thought was just an absolute blast in creativity of how you build a whole game around styling. This one still takes the idea of these costumes unlocking certain things or advancing you. So each costume will give you particular abilities in different parts of the game. So one, for instance, might give you the ability to jump. Another one may help you pet dogs. And so it's a super high quality 3D game. It's a huge pivot. It's a company that's in China. They have a Japanese branch now. It turns out they also have a Los Angeles branch as well, which I'm curious to learn more about. In terms of early success, and again, just looking at mobile because we don't have EGS numbers, we look at the download rankings in China, which I still think is the key demographic for this game. On December 3rd, when it launched, it was number 1 in the games category, and it slipped a little bit in the past week, but it's still pretty strong in terms of downloads. As we heard, it hit 10 million players across all platforms over the week. So I don't know what else to say. Like, it looks great. It's a really innovative game. I'm really happy to see the female audience also get directly marketed to. If you go on YouTube and watch videos of influencers, it's all young teenage girls who are super into this game and are really excited about it. I think it's a demographic that deserves more love and attention because we know they spend, and this is a game that appeals to them. And it also doesn't have combat. You don't go out and kill anything. You like almost revive monsters, or you kind of stun them with your abilities. There's no murder. It's a joyful world to be a part of. The plot is actually kind of heavy, but by and large, it's just awesome. It's just, I don't want to call it cozy, but it feels good. It feels good to be a part of this world. I love it. I'm only 2 hours in, but I'm going to become a big spender.
I think you and I have actually played almost as much of this game. I played it this morning for an hour or so and got to the new town or whatever. Yes. I have kind of a different take on this game, I'll be honest. And I don't want to upset our anime friends out there, but this game is a little freaky, dude. It's freaky as fuck, actually. It's like you are literally dressing up a 13-year-old girl character. Like, that's the game. Basically, the whole meta is getting outfits for these characters, right? And as an adult male, maybe it's me. Maybe it's just me, right? It just doesn't feel appropriate for me to be engaging in such behavior. But yeah, I don't know, dude. This is definitely a game for Ethan Levy, though. Like, Ethan, they'll love this shit, dude. He's all over this one, right? 2 mentions for Ethan. But it is a cozy game, right? Yeah, no killing. It is absolutely beautiful. Like, I think, and I mean, the world is beautiful, just to be clear, so I don't want to be all creeped out. And
perhaps you're not the audience, and that's okay.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
I'm going to put this one in my bucket of, like, I'm only going to watch YouTube clips of this one. This is just not one that I'm going to play.
Yeah.
Right? Like, too many other games.
It felt a little dirty, and I think I'm going to uninstall.
Did you ever play Bayonetta back in the day?
Oh, yeah. Back that
was another one where I was like, I can't play this. I can't do this.
Yeah.
It appeals to a certain demographic that luckily is not you. Thank you.
Okay. Anyways,
and Ethan. Certain demographic of Ethan. Okay.
Well, folks like anime, and there's a reason why some folks like anime. But listen, I think the idea of a game that has broader appeal than just core mechanics and, Phil, to your point, is appealing to young women that is aspirational. And that is a play pattern that is interesting. I applaud companies doing those types of things, right? Like, we need more different things.
With monetization, just to be clear, like, they're $50 outfits in this game. Like, this is where I draw the line between this and like Star Stables, which is a company in Sweden. They make horse games, which are like MMO based. They don't know how to monetize for shit. They're so afraid. Oh my God, we have young girls. Love Nikki. Nope. $50 costumes. Let's go, baby.
Oh my God.
Love it.
It is dude, the shit's no joke, dude. Monetization wise. That's the first thing I looked at. I was like, holy crap.
Is it gotcha?
Is like,
oh, it's insane. Yeah. Star system. Okay. Oh, we got the whole system arrives.
Dude.
This is disgusting. Let's move on.
Predatory.
This is disgusting.
They're preying on those peds that
will never enter my household.
Is it like the Hoyoverse? Is it like the Genshin, the Honkais of the world with that same kind of like level up?
Yeah, there's loot boxes. There's pulls.
Okay.
Yeah, there's gotcha pulls.
I think it could be even more extreme.
There's crafting.
Oh,
yeah, I would agree. You should go dunk on Strynova. Leave Infinity Nikki alone. Like, Infinity Nikki's not for like the adult males in the room. That's Strynova. I think Infinity Nikki really appeals to kind of like the teenage girl segment.
Okay, yeah,
I think this is the wrong one to shoot your arrows at. This one's more
Strynova
wholesome.
is a hero shooter, like going after the Overwatch category, right?
It's going after otakus for sure.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right, everybody, we have done a lot and there's more to do. So we'll pick it up next week. See you then.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.